Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 13th of August, comes to you from London. And the dollar looking very flat the last few days, quite unusual to be that range bound. So we're fairly neutral at the moment, but bullish on the medium and longer term charts. That means also, that, of course, that the Eurodollar is relatively flat as well, but still middling to bearish. Against the yen, the dollar is actually still falling away, so we're bearish there, and until we see a change in direction against the yen, it's hard to call the dollar higher. Looking at sterling, we're sitting at that 120.50 level this morning, so the 120 level starting to look like it will come under pressure. And looking at sterling against the euro, we're back below the 108 level. So still looking pretty bearish there. And against the Swissy, 116.92, so teetering along the bottom there too. So sterling still looking pretty bearish. Bitcoin sitting at $11,325, little change there over the last few days. Still looking a little bit bearish on the downside in the short term. You see the S&P 500 index was down 1.2% overnight, so that is now pushing back to the support level, and again, if we break below last week's low, that would be bad news for the market. And much the same picture on the Nasdaq, of course, and the Dow was down 1.5%, also just coming back to test that support level, so a little bit worrying there at the moment. The Russell 2000 index looking weaker and is bearish on all three time frames, so broader based stocks in the US not looking so good. The futures this morning down slightly on the S&P E-mini, and the same on the Nasdaq E-mini as well. Very early in the day to say how the US will open. We need to watch these indices develop ahead of the open, but for the moment it's looking fairly flat. The UK market down very slightly this morning, but again sitting in bearish territory and coming back to test last week's low. So it's much the same picture everywhere. Same with the midcaps. We really are getting quite close to testing last week's lows here, so that's a bit worrying. The DAX in Germany also down 0.3% this morning, looking bearish on all three time frames. And the CAC 40 also much the same picture there as well. The Japanese market was down 1% last night, so that's not looking great. And the Hang Seng was down 1.8%. The political situation in Hong Kong now starting to have some bigger ramifications for markets, and markets now taking that quite seriously, and we're seeing Hong Kong looking negative on all three time frames. The same for Shanghai, down 0.6% overnight. The Sensex was down 0.5% and looking bearish on medium and short-term charts, and the Aussie market, which has been the strongest market really, making new highs last month, now looking bearish on the short term, but holding on to its long term and medium term bullish trends. Crude oil sitting at 58.22, just actually above the short term cloud on Brent, and WTI actually looking stronger. So crude oil looking bullish on the short term chart. US nat gas sitting steady at $2.12. Gold is back up very sharply this morning, sitting at 15.23, up nearly 1%. So the gold price really rocketing there, is now really clear of that $1,500 mark, having just gone back below it very briefly. Silver also looking bullish, as you might expect. US 10-year yields sitting at 1.63%, so we're back in the 160s, and yields just looking to go lower and lower, and that means German bond prices actually looking to go higher. So negative yields continue to be the theme. Looking at the individual stocks, if we take a look at the Dow last night, you can see it was all down, and so very rare that we see that, but all stocks were down. Pfizer was down 2.6%, that was the worst performer. Goldman Sachs down 2.6% as well. So a lot of these stocks moving into negative territory, so we're starting to see some quite worrying charts building. Looking at the Nasdaq, of course, 100 stocks, only a handful of them were up. Amgen was up 5%, looking quite good. They've had a good week actually. And then looking on the downside, well, we had some very big falls here. 9% on Mercado Libre, Symantec down 5.7%, AMD down 5%, Monster also falling. Some of these stocks still holding on to their bull trends, but it's looking pretty worrying for stocks at the moment, even though we were just making new highs recently. The Aussie market Here we have Fortescue Metals, the best performer, up 3.5%. Looking a little bit more worrying on the medium-term chart and the relative breaking down. Arizon Holdings actually looking amazingly. So still some good charts to be found, and there's two of them. On the downside, we've got Cobra Limited, they're down 6%, and CYBG down 6% as well. That's a really bad looking chart. Taking a look now at the Indian market, the Nifty 50, we had Reliance Industries up 10%, so that was quite a good chart given everything else that was going on. India Bulls Housing also up 10%. Now that's a big counter trend move for them. On the downside, Yes Bank continues to be a laggard, down 7%. Chart looking pretty dire there. Looking to Europe now quickly. If we look at the FTSE 100, the best performer is TUI Group this morning, up 2%. They made an announcement on their provision for the MaxJet crisis. Looking at Fresno, they're up 1%, but there's really a counter trend move there. The trend not looking great. On the downside, Rolls-Royce continues to be a laggard. They're down 2%. So the chart really not looking great there. And Centrica also still sitting in those laggards, down 1.6%, making new lows this morning. On the FTSE 250, plus 500 is the best performer, up nearly 9% this morning. Funding Circle actually recovering a little bit there, but if we look at the downside, lots of downside stocks here. Aston Martin down a further 6%. They've really struggled, had a terrible year, and Nvidia down 3.8%. Looking at the Euro stocks, we've got Total in Paris. They're up this morning, but the chart doesn't look good at all. If we look at Deutsche Telekom, they're up, but also the chart doesn't look great. Here we see the live pricing coming in from Yahoo Finance. And if we look at Amadeus IT, they're the worst performer this morning, down 1.4%, and actually starting to look a little bit bearish on that medium-term chart. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.